Today we are checking out the various home conversions of one of Taito's most cutest creations that released in arcades back in 1988, and it was an instant hit. Very strange name for a colourful platform like this one, but it turns out that the name was conceived as well as a setting in gameplay after one of Taito's programmers actually went to New Zealand for a holiday. If you are at a certain age, and oldie but goldie like myself, you will likely remember how heavily advertised this was in the early 90s or even late 80s. Personally, it's not a game I played growing up, but do remember it being heavily advertised in magazines at the time. So what is it about? You play a Kiwi known as Tiki. You must rescue his girlfriend whose name is Fifi. So Kiwi, Tiki, Fifi, yes, try saying that 10 times. Anyways, the game is a colourful scrolling platformer and we must guide Tiki to the end goal before the timer runs out. I will note here, Ocean did a lot of versions for this game, but don't let that put you off. They did some good publications from time to time. Anyways, this one has been requested loads, so let's go. We start today's video by taking a look at Amstrad CPC's conversion. Ocean published this monstrosity in 1990. On first glance it looks fine. I kind of have become accustomed to the smaller gameplay areas of Amstrad games during this series. Sprite sizes are adequate too. Music is actually the best part of this conversion though. It actually sounds like more effort was put into this than anything else. So why is the game so terrible? Firstly, enemy sprites are very often the same colour as background colours, so enemies can be difficult to see sometimes. Brown shelled enemies, for example, whilst walking with the same colour of brown behind them is just ridiculous. Secondly, the scrolling screen here just seems all over the place. It just doesn't really centralise anything when you're playing the game, and seeing enemies below you often leads us to our death whilst blind jumping. There is no funky animated introduction with this version here. This game just doesn't flow well at all. The ZX Spectrum received a fair version of the New Zealand Story. It certainly has a good sound of the theme music, which we can choose to disable in favour for sound effects if you find the music drives you insane after a few minutes. Now, I won't lie, although this is a very good specky game, I found that it does have some issues around keeping a consistent frame rate. When enemies are crowding the screen, which can happen very often, it does slow down. It's not enough to deem it as unplayable by any means, but with a little less going on at once, this could have made it more fluid. Newcomers to the ZX Spectrum might find it bizarre to look at with the yellow background and black outlines, but it is a part of British computing history, and most people loved this back in the day, so there. This is a fairly good port and does control well too. Is it the best thing ever for the ZX Spectrum? Nah, not really, but it is average for an arcade conversion. I will get some hate for this more than likely, but let's just stay focused. We are looking for the most accurate arcade port of the game. Oddly enough, as many versions in this video do tend to slightly differ in terms of stage design, most do roughly stick with a particular version of platforms. For example, the Sega Mega Drive or Sega Genesis port, on the other hand, is a different kettle of fish altogether. After playing many versions at this point during editing, I had gotten used to how the game looks and plays across most platforms. This version sticks out like a sore thumb. There's just arrows galore here for some bizarre reason. The game itself is fairly dark too compared with most other versions here. Taito released this port in 1990, and I must say it's definitely not up there with other versions in terms of gameplay and looks. A totally bizarre entry here for sure. Am I right to say this version was pretty strange? Let me know in the comments. Personally, I was expecting to rank the Sega Mega Drive or Sega Genesis conversion much higher in this. I was pretty surprised with this release. Now, this is how to do an arcade conversion with an 8-bit microcomputer. Firstly, a nice big full screen where multi-scrolling works perfectly and everything seems centralized, unlike the Amstrad's messy port. This is a highly polished Commodore 64 game by Ocean, releasing back in 1989. The music was produced by Jonathan Dunn, one of the standout SID musicians from back in the day who did many others that were all really high in quality. As you can see, the game does deviate from the arcades game just like others do, with a different level design, but you know what you're playing because Tiki is so nicely designed here. It's a joy to play with a fair challenge, surprisingly. If you haven't played this game, don't let the cuteness fool you. The New Zealand Story is a fairly challenging game. As great as the Commodore 64 port is, one issue it does have is the timer. You don't have much time here to get through stages. We get a choice of either music or sound effects here, but not both at once, unfortunately. Have you ever felt that Tiki was on amphetamines with the Sega Master System's 1992 release by Tech Magic? A fairly late entry for the Sega Master System library for sure. Now, if you have never seen this port before, you will notice that our yellow little friend is going for it like Linford Christie here. I assure you, this isn't a bad version of the game, this is how it actually released. So fast that I wonder if the team of coders behind it were getting it confused with Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm not sure, but on a serious note, despite the weirdness of that, the game looks really stunning. Its contrasts really do look great and sprites are nicely drawn here too. Collision detection is fairly good here. There is some slight sprite or tile flicker when things get overcrowded. The truth is it just runs so damn fast. Even the music sounds like it's on 1 too. It really is a shame about the speed problem, otherwise this would have ranked much higher, but really it is a little off-putting. The NES version was created by Software Creations back in 1991. It was also known as Kiwi Craze in North America. Now, my first impressions were that although it is a very good and responsive arcade conversion for the mighty 8-bit Nintendo console, the yellow colours do seem a little dull for a NES game, which is surprising as NES could really bring out colourful games. There is no introduction here, which I found a little odd too, and there is a lot of sprite flicker in the game. The music and sound effects are nicely implemented here. Now, for the NES fanboys out there, remind yourself this video was strictly looking for arcade perfection, and this port doesn't even feature the opening animation. It is also missing background features too, such as archways and fences. Backgrounds of objects such as trees are very scaled down here too, which is very noticeable. I will give it this though, the brickwork looks fantastic with this version in the background. Taito's 1990 PC Engine or TurboGrafx 16 release is extremely good in comparison with the NES and Master System speeded up situation. I have to be nitpicky here though and say that although this is a solid game in its own right, we are still looking for arcade perfection, or as close as possible that is. So firstly, the backgrounds aren't as detailed as the versions preceding this version. The brickwork, for example, isn't that nicely detailed compared with some to come, and the colours just don't match the yellowy orangey contrast of the 1980 arcades game. Like I say, I do need to be nitpicky from now on because this is the start of where the home conversions start looking and playing really nicely. It is good to control with a fair speed used here. There is however some slight frame drops from time to time with this version. The Commodore Amiga conversion was a little hard to judge between itself and the next version in this video. I ranked this one place down because although it's a great game on the Amiga, it comes with a couple of minor imperfections. Firstly, the Commodore Amiga version does scroll nice throughout, but Tiki just seems a tad little janky to control. Like I say, a minor imperfection if anything. Secondly, there was a particular stage where enemies should have been spawning in order for me to progress further into the stage, but weirdly enough, nothing spawned at all, and it kept me waiting for around 40 seconds and walking backwards and forwards for this odd glitch to sort itself out. It comes with a nicely animated introduction alongside stage maps prior to stages beginning. No doubt about it, Atari ST users had a really good conversion of the New Zealand story. The team of coders behind this knew exactly what they were doing with the hardware too. It is a very bright and colourful version with really nice music and sound effects. It comes with a joyful animated introduction before the game begins, and even includes the map of New Zealand, which tells you which stage you're about to start. I can't really criticise the Atari ST's version for frame rate issues, because for the first 5 stages of playing this version, it did occasionally drop, but cannot say it was unplayable at all, because this really was a solid version in all aspects. Sure, the map isn't on the screen. Going back to the music, it's not often that I say Atari ST games sound better than, say, the Commodore Amiga, but considering we are doing the next best thing to the arcades game itself, I just felt that the 8-bit sounds which the Atari ST produces just sounded much better than some 16-bit conversions did. As usual for FM Towns games, we get several options such as difficulty level. This game even features different resolution modes too, which when in high resolution mode it looks stunning. However, I left it to default just so the gameplay video is a little bigger for viewers to watch. Now firstly, whereas most versions could not capture the authentic tones of colour, the FM Towns Ving Co-Limited 1989 release managed to pull this off really well. The colours in fact are some of the best here, with very highly detailed sprite design. It doesn't appear to suffer from frame drops when the screen is bombarded with enemies. It controls really nicely. On the downside, the music definitely isn't the most accurate rendition, and sound effects tend to appear then disappear sporadically. Overall, a solid Japanese release with a couple of minor sound problems. We also have the map on the bottom left hand side here, just like the arcades game had. And for a notable mention before we look at top spot, we have the Nintendo DS 2008 conversion by Ignition Entertainment. This was titled the New Zealand Story Revolution. I won't include this as such as part of the ranking, because although it looks great and it is an updated version of the original game with complete overhaul graphics and sprites, it includes new challenges which weren't in the original arcades game. We can also use the touchpad on the Nintendo DS to solve little puzzles within the game. Like I say, a great updated version by the people who also did Rainbow Islands Revolution 2. In first place, I have ranked the Sharp's X68000 conversion by Sharp, which released in 1989. Now, the issue is with X68000 ports is that a few people were saying in previous videos that the Sharp X68000 will always win, but that strictly isn't always the case. Surprisingly, this Japanese powerhouse did have some stinkers, believe it or not. Somebody also commented a while back of why X68000 was even in my rankings, as, I'm going to quote, the UK didn't have these. Let me just remind you that my content is actually watched in Japan, and by disqualifying a Japanese computer makes no sense, and this would be absolutely rude towards my Japanese audience. Anyways, the Sharp X68000 port itself is likely the next best thing you will get to the 1988 game without a doubt. It scrolls smoothly, suffers from zero sprite flickering, it contains perfect music and sound effects, and truly is a joy to play too. We also have a lovely full screen here here, and everything has been so well coded. If you did have a Sharp X68000 in the late 1980s, this would have been arcade perfection in your own home. And that's it for ranking the various different conversions of the New Zealand Story today. So granted, there was a lot, and there's likely more, so if I did forget a particular version, I do apologise, but I've added the main systems here. Which version did you go with? Did you get lumbered with the Amstrad CPC conversion, or did you have the absolute creme de la creme, which was the Sharp X68000's version? Let us know in the comments. Anyways, until next video comes, thanks for watching.